Very much for helping, and thanks very much for helping make sure we have everything working correctly. And it's 2 o'clock Eastern time, so I'd like to welcome everyone to Librarian and Faculty Perceptions of AI in the Disciplines, brought to you by the ACRL University Library Section's Professional Development Committee. We're so delighted to have you and our three presenters here today. And I'm Brad Seitz, a member of the committee, and I'll be moderating the program along with my colleague Jane, who is a committee co-chair. And this is one of a series of online programs sponsored by our committee. I'll put the link to some of our sessions in the chat. And before I introduce our presenters, a few logistics. As noted, this session is being recorded, and we will send the link of the video, the slides, and any other supplemental documentation to everyone who registered for the program after it is over. Please note, we're not able to share the chat transcript due to privacy reasons, but we will be able to share any links or questions we receive in the chat along with that webinar recording. This program will run for an hour total, including time for questions. Please feel free to add questions into the chat box throughout the presentation at any time. Since we do have multiple presenters, they likely will be looking at the chat box and perhaps answering as we go along, but we will be collating them with Jane and everyone else to make sure we're prepared to read them and make sure as many as possible get answered by today's presenters. And as you use the chat feature, please make sure to send your message to everyone, so everyone can see what you're asking. Don't just send it to one person, unless that's what you specifically mean to do, but generally send it to everyone. And then at the very end, we'll post a link to a brief evaluation in the chat box at the end. And please take a few moments because we value your feedback. And with those announcements out of the way, I'm happy to start today's program, and I'll briefly introduce the three presenters, and they'll can more fully introduce themselves as they see fit. Tessa Withorn is the science librarian and assistant professor at the University of Louisville. She received her master's of library science degree from Indiana University Bloomington and a bachelor's in English from the University of Louisville. She has published and presented on critical information literacy and AI literacy. Brittany Stein is an associate professor and director of the Bridwell Library at the University of Louisville. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Classical Archaeology and Latin from the University of Georgia and a Master of Library and Information Science degree from Valdosta State University. She's published and presented on information literacy, gaming in academic libraries, and burnout for librarians with faculty status. And Amber Willenberg is the instruction coordinator and an associate professor at the University of Louisville. She received her Master's of Library and Information Science degree from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and as well as a bachelor's in English from UI-UC. She has published and presented on information literacy, online learning, and student success. And with that, I will hand it over to our panelists.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you all for being here. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Librarian and Faculty Perceptions of AI in the Disciplines. Thanks to those of you who have participated or are currently participating in the Padlet. We hope that that got you thinking about today's presentation topic in your own context, as well as giving you an idea of what other folks are currently experiencing with AI in their disciplines. I am going to go ahead and add that to the chat one more time for people who are just joining us. And please feel free to continue to post there. Our plan is to discuss some of what you all have written towards the end of the session today. The three of us are going to introduce ourselves in just a moment, but we wanted to start with a brief explanation of this project and why we're sharing it here today. So Tessa, Courtney, and I are three academic librarians at the same university, but who work with faculty in vastly different disciplines. So we decided to talk to the faculty we work with about AI, their thoughts on AI, how they are or are not using it in classrooms, and any opportunities and challenges they see see with AI in higher education. We thought this would be really valuable to see how AI is impacting higher education from this broad lens that spans several disciplines. And we also found that this work helped us in thinking about our approach to supporting AI literacy as librarians, because we saw through our conversations that we really can't just generalize across our whole university about AI. Different faculty in different disciplines have wide-ranging views on AI, and what they want and need pertaining to their students' AI literacy skills varies widely. So our hope is that this presentation will give us all a broader perspective on how AI is affecting various disciplines in terms of teaching, learning, and scholarship or creative work, and that we can all take some of what we learned from these conversations and from what you all share in that Padlet about your disciplines to help guide future conversations with disciplinary faculty and to guide all of our work as librarians in addressing AI. So with that, we will move on to our formal introductions. I'll start. I'm Amber Willenberg. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the instruction coordinator in the Research Assistance and Instruction Department at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. A little background on U of L. We are a Research One institution with approximately 23,000 students. We have a subject liaison model in which specific librarians work directly with their assigned colleges and departments. I work in the Research Assistance and Instruction Department, which serves most of the programs on our campus outside of health sciences, art, music, and law, which all have their own dedicated libraries. And in my role, I coordinate the instruction program, which sees about 200 to 250 course integrated one-shot sessions per academic year. I am the liaison to the departments of communication and women's gender and sexuality studies, and I work especially closely with our first year composition and communication programs. So I provide the bulk of instruction for our English 101 and English 102 Introduction to College Writing courses, along with our Communication 111 Intro to Public Speaking course. So in this presentation, I'm going to be sharing the perspective of faculty in disciplines that are working closely with first year students as they develop foundational writing skills.
Great. I'm next. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Stein. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an associate professor and director of the Brunwa Art Library. My library holds over 90,000 volumes and manages the University of Louisville Library's collections in the visual arts. We support the Haidt Institute of Art and Design's programs in art history, critical and curatorial studies, studio art, and design. I have been at U of L for 5 years, and my responsibilities as the library director range from serving on the library's senior administration team, supervising 2 full-time staff and 8 student employees, collection development in the visual arts, and managing our budget and art library facilities. My job involves wearing a lot of hats, but instruction is a top priority for me because my background is in information literacy instruction. The Art Library's instruction program is centered around the nature and processes of research, critical inquiry, and creative practice. I teach art history, studio, and design specific skills, such as identifying bindings and book arts techniques with our artist book collection, differentiating between types of art publications, analyzing visual materials, and evaluating popular and scholarly forms of art writing. I also spend a lot of time helping students navigate the stacks as art research tends to rely heavily on physical materials. Today, I'm going to share the perspective of faculty in studio art and art history and their perspectives on artificial intelligence's impact on their respective disciplines and approaches to teaching.
And I'm Tessa Withorn. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the science librarian and an assistant professor, also in the Research Assistance and Instruction Department at U of L. I serve a pretty traditional liaison role, like Amber mentioned, and I work with all the STEM disciplines except for engineering, which has its own school and liaison, but everything else is housed in our College of Arts and Science. So my areas include biology, chemistry, geographic and environmental sciences, math, physics, and astronomy. I've been at U of L since January 2023, so for about 2 years now, I've been slowly building my relationships with students and faculty in my areas. I have to admit, though, it has been a little hard to break into the STEM programs. There are some departments that I work really closely with, like biology and geography, where I've done one-shots for capstone classes, tutorials on evaluating scientific information for undergraduate courses, and consulting on assignment design for some library assignments. Whereas math and physics have invited me to department meetings, and that's about it for now. But part of this might be because we didn't have a very consistent STEM liaison for several years prior to my arrival. So I think the library sort of faded in their minds. In my new role, though, I really want to show STEM researchers that the library and librarians are still valuable resources, even if they're just sticking to Google Scholar and AI. Now I'm going to turn it over to Amber to get started on our faculty profiles.
Yes, so what we're going to be doing for the bulk of this presentation is sharing what we all learned from conversations about AI with the faculty we work with. And the way that we're going to talk about our disciplinary faculty are with these profiles that we've created that combine similar themes from conversations with faculty in the same departments. So each profile is not just about one person, it's an amalgamation of several faculty that we spoke with, and it's our attempt to just generalize across faculty in the same discipline about their outlook and concerns around Gen AI. So the first profile that I am going to talk about is Joan, the communication professor. So Joan is a tenured faculty member who is extremely busy with teaching, producing scholarship, being involved in several service roles, your classic, professor who's been here a long time. Because of this, Joan's general theme around AI was, I don't have time for this. She has played around with AI technology a little bit on her own, but she has not integrated it into her classes because the initial time investment to get to that point is just too huge. She's also concerned that our university here at U of L, we don't yet have an official AI policy, which makes it difficult for individual units and instructors to create their own policies. Her current syllabus, she mentioned, barely even touches on AI. She just has her general plagiarism statement, but hasn't really included anything specific to AI technologies. She thinks, though, that once other faculty begin figuring out AI, that designing a class with AI in mind will be simpler and less time consuming, but she really feels no need to be an early adopter. Joan also talked about student use of AI, and she said, of course, students are definitely using it to write their speeches, to complete their assignments. In her service roles, she has even read scholarship applications that were clearly written by AI. So she has concerns about students cheating with AI, and she believes that instructors and librarians should be helping students understand the ethics of AI and understanding AI as a tool with a specific purpose. Joan used the analogy of how you can dig a hole with a stick or you can dig a hole with a shovel, as long as you're not making false claims about what tool was used. So she wants her students to understand that AI is just another resource. It's just another Google, but more advanced, and that you should use whatever resources you have. We don't ban the use of Google, but we need to make sure that we are using these tools ethically and we're not having someone or something else do all the work for us. In her discipline, Joan is seeing a lot of calls for papers and conference sessions on AI. When she submits articles now, the websites ask her about her use of AI in the submitted research, so this is something new to her. She sees the potential of AI to save time for her as a researcher by doing things like creating figures for her articles, but she hasn't used AI in that way or in any way for her own research or scholarship yet. And in her department, she's also not seeing a lot of instructors utilizing AI yet, especially in lower division speech courses, but there is some conversation going on among her department members. In the field of communication more generally, Joan believes that there is potential for AI to address the human need for communication and as a potential solution for addressing loneliness. She said, to some extent, it may or may not be the same as having a human friend to have an AI friend or to have an actual dog versus an artificial dog, but I think those lines are going to blur more across time. There's much more potential opportunity for good. So she is seeing some positives with AI in her discipline. Overall, Joan believed that the biggest challenge with AI is the potential for it to cheat students out of learning. No matter what she does as a professor, no matter how engaging her syllabus is, or how good her activities are, or how fun her readings are, she really believes it's up to the students to get the most out of their education. And she worries that some might just choose the easy path of using AI and getting nothing out of their college experience. So she ended our conversation by saying, if we cheat ourselves out of learning, what are we really doing here? And I think that really sums up her biggest concern. The other profile that I am going to touch on is Michelle, the writing instructor. So unlike Joan, Michelle is not a tenured faculty member. She's a PhD student in composition who is teaching for the comp program here at U of L while she's working on her dissertation. This is typical of most of the instructors for these intro writing courses. They're generally master's or PhD students in composition, or they're adjunct instructors. So a lot fewer faculty members, full-time faculty, tenure track faculty. Michelle is herself an extensive user of AI, having used a lot of AI tools while working on her dissertation. She specifically mentioned Humata, a tool that extracts insights from documents, as something that she uses to make herself a better reader. She also regularly has conversations with ChatGPT about her dissertation to hammer out details. And she also uses AI tools to help with lesson planning, like asking ChatGPT, give me 5 ideas to gamify this lesson. Michelle also talked about AI as a powerful tool in teaching students to become better writers. She acknowledges that students are using it in their coursework, they're using it in their lives, and that they want to talk about it in the classroom. And I have a list of just a few of the ways that she talks about using AI in the writing classroom. So as new scholars, she has students ask ChatGPT what disciplines would be interested in my research topic to help get them started thinking about where they can go to find information and who's having the conversations around their topics. She has AI write a version of a reflection assignment for class, and then students critique the reflection to see AI's capabilities as far as reflective writing. She has ChatGPT write a summary of an article, and she has her students work together on a summary of the same article to show them that AI can't really synthesize as well as humans can. The students realize that their synthesis is actually better. And she has students use AI as a reading tool to help them better understand content, especially discipline-specific content that's new to them. So having a conversation about an article they're reading with an AI tool. Overall, she teaches her students that AI is like a know-it-all friend who makes stuff up if they don't know the answer. But she makes sure to teach students how to use it appropriately to play to its strengths. She also talks about evaluating the output of AI for hallucinations, telling her students not to just trust everything that AI tells them. Throughout these activities, Michelle said that students actually begin to see that AI cannot do all that they thought it could. And they actually become frustrated with the technology. They see that it really can't write their essay for them, that it's not very good at synthesizing information, and that it doesn't always provide great sources or even sources that actually exist. Michelle's biggest point throughout our conversation was that she actually isn't too worried about students using AI to cheat in her composition courses. ChatGPT cannot write a passable essay for a student that wouldn't immediately be recognized by a good writing teacher, in her opinion. She said things like word salad, word choices that students would never make it really clear when an essay is AI generated. She also talked about assignment design being extremely important, and Michelle believes that an assignment that can be done by ChatGPT isn't an assignment that's worth her students' time. So in the end, Michelle believes that AI technologies will simply accelerate the gap between those students who would do really well anyway and who will now use these tools to do even better in their education, and those who would find a way to cheat regardless of what technologies were available to them.
All right, and now moving on to some of the art faculty profiles. First up is Georgia, the painting professor. Georgia is a tenured professor of painting who works closely with graduate students enrolled in the Master of Fine Arts program. She finds that artists, as content creators, are naturally skeptical of AI. They see it as unethical and they want nothing to do with it. Students have expressed concerns about government infiltration through AI, even though AI technologies are largely corporation driven. However, Georgia points out that, like it or not, students are already using AI in some form because it's unavoidable in our daily lives. Georgia is known for her abstract still life paintings that mimic Dutch artworks from the 16th through the 18th centuries. She used to paint directly on top of reproductions, but eventually evolved her artistic practice to incorporate AI through the creation of a data set. She started by curating a data set of still life paintings, which inspired her abstract still life reproductions, and eventually created a data set of her own paintings, which allows her to build upon her own body of work. Georgia started using AI tools to code before the launch of DALL-E, which reads like WALL-E, the movie, so DALL-E, which is a text-to-image model that generates digital images from natural language descriptions known as prompts. This is how many artworks were used by AI to generate a new work of art based on a text prompt. Given Georgia's experience incorporating AI into her work, she wants her students to learn how AI works, where the data comes from, and why the ethics are murky. Although there are many artists who are upset about AI's reuse of their work without their explicit consent or compensation, Georgia is not as preoccupied about the intellectual property issue surrounding the use of her own artwork, but is concerned about the data sets that are overwhelmingly white and Western-centric, eliminating entire groups of people from the conversation. Despite these concerns, Georgia is excited by the possibilities since ChatGPT and other generative AI tools can write code. This gives power to users, especially artists who do not typically have the technical skills to write and use code, and allows this technology to be used in a critical way to call out and disrupt the corporations that monetize this data. Overall, I found studio art faculty are encouraging their students to learn more about AI and embrace the endless opportunities for working in digital media art. And so moving on to the next profile, which is Julie, the art historian, who has some similar concerns to Joan, the communication professor, regarding academic honesty, but isn't waiting for the university to take action on AI. So Julie is an assistant professor specializing in contemporary art history. Julie's primary concern is undergraduate students' usage of generative AI tools in their art history assignments. Students enrolled in lower level courses are rarely majors and may not be invested in developing expertise in the subject of art history. So they tend to rely on AI tools to bridge the gap in their knowledge to complete their research assignments. Julie says art history is not, the same thing as giving brain surgery. So it's not really doing anyone harm for the students not to give 100% to the course, except perhaps to their grade. However, she wants her students to think critically and understand how to use AI tools ethically, a skill set that is transferable to their other courses. ChatGPT and other tools may be okay for general information about the history of art, especially major works of art from the art historical canon that tend to be white, Western, and male focused. But it doesn't have citations, and it is generally inefficient for contemporary or lesser known works of art. Julie has found that the quality of students' output is largely driven by the structure of the research assignment, so she's tweaked her assignments accordingly. The broader and more general the assignment, the more useful AI becomes for students. Instead, higher quality results depend upon asking very specific questions, such as asking students to select a work from a class lecture or quote from an assigned reading, which requires them to put in some effort and go beyond AI, even if it is used. Assignments can also be scaffolded, requiring an annotated bibliography or giving a class presentation. Presentations in particular are very effective to check students' knowledge of a topic, and they tend to put in a lot more effort into their presentations because they don't want to be embarrassed in front of their fellow classmates. So Julie uses GPT-0 to check for AI-generated papers. And when I interviewed this professor over the summer, she emphasized the gray area between academic honesty and AI and wished, again, similar to Joan, the communication professor, that the university would provide more standard language for ethical AI usage for faculty at our university. So this fall, she has decided to take matters into her own hands, and she's added language to her syllabi explicitly stating students cannot submit any work generated by an AI program as their own and must give credit to AI tools whenever used. Julie requires her students to give credit to AI tools, even if it's just to generate ideas and it doesn't go any further than that. This is done by adding an appendix to their final assignment, describing which AI tools were used, requiring them to specify between free programs or subscription versions, explanation of how the tools were used, such as identifying key concepts, why AI tools were consulted, maybe because students got writer's block, for example, and then supplying the entire interaction with the AI tool. Julie believes students should only use AI tools reflectively with a genuine aim to deepen their own understanding of this subject. Overall, our conversation focused solely on the impact of AI in the classroom, didn't quite delve into its specific impact on the field of art history. However, especially as more artists like Georgia the painting professor utilize AI in their own artwork, this is likely to become a more prominent research topic in the field of art history moving forward.
Great, so we'll move on to our STEM professors then. So similar to faculty in other areas, Sally, the STEM professor, is skeptical about the capabilities of AI for college assignments in particular. She represents several faculty that I spoke to that kind of brush AI aside because, as they would say, ChatGPT can't do good science. Sally teaches an undergraduate lab course and spoke to how generative AI can understand the formula of a lab report, but it would just make up data in its place, not being very useful. She doesn't think that students are using Gen AI for lab reports, and she does have her graduate students who teach those lab sections in the classroom, monitoring students and ensuring that they're inputting their own data and writing their own reports. Other STEM professors also spoke about how AI tools like ChatGPT couldn't produce mathematical proofs, for example, or realistic anatomical figures. Coding was a little bit different because it is able to produce some basic code that's possible, but there are still errors that students would need to be able to have the skills to debug, especially when they input it into a live environment. STEM faculty also discussed the limitations of using Gen AI for literature searching in particular. They were aware that ChatGPT could hallucinate fake citations, but they know that students are using more legitimate AI-powered search tools. You may have heard of some of these before, like Elicit or Cite AI for finding and summarizing articles. Again, they were skeptical of these capabilities and were really worried that students would cheat themselves out of their education. As Sally put it, engaging with the literature is part of students' academic training. If they rely too much on AI, they aren't developing expertise, which is essential to becoming a good scientist. When working with graduate students on producing research articles for her lab, graduate students are often tasked with writing the literature review, and Sally impresses upon them how important a comprehensive lit search is, and also mentions that peer reviewers will really be scrutinizing their lit reviews and whether they are citing the main scholars in the field. Especially for graduate students, publishing is a big motivator for growing their careers, and some may be using ChatGPT or other tools for writing, especially if that's not their strength. But in my instruction and some of Sally's instruction. We emphasize paying close attention to scientific journals' policies on the use of AI and using AI ethically for writing. On the other side of STEM, Eli, the engineer, thinks a little bit more practically about AI, embracing it for its abilities to create efficiencies, while also still being skeptical about ethical use. Eli teaches a fundamentals engineering course to undergraduate students and has surveyed them about their perceptions and use of ChatGPT to inform his instruction. He learned from that survey that a surprising number of students were not aware of AI at all, and those who were had a lot of concerns about whether it would be considered cheating. Some of them he also thought may be not disclosing their use of AI for fear of shame. He also created an assignment where students use ChatGPT to write and analyze code, but also sets clear expectations for how AI can be used and credited in their work. Eli is a leader of AI literacy on campus and submitted a grant to build a faculty learning community around AI literacy and assessment. He hopes that more faculty will put AI policies in their syllabi so students aren't confused from class to class about if and how they can use AI. He directs students to guidance from style guides like APA that has examples of how to cite ChatGPT in their work. In sessions that I've taught students and have mentioned other AI tools, I did get a really interesting, important question that one student asked about whether it's ethical to use AI research tools and whether they should be citing AI research tools in their work. I don't know if this is exactly correct, but my answer to that was basically no, unless it was part of an evidence synthesis project where disclosing a search strategy is part of the methodology itself and important to its reproducibility. We don't typically disclose what library databases we use to conduct a search, or Google Scholar, for example. Eli and his students also think that AI literacy and prompt engineering is a great job skill, and that employers will increasingly be looking for AI literacy skills and prompt engineering skills to save companies time and resources. Unlike the classroom, though, where there can be clear expectations for AI use, it gets a little bit murky in the workplace. For example, do you tell your boss that you wrote a script of code to save you hours of your work, or do you leave that out? So they don't necessarily see AI as a threat to their profession. They do see human thinking and input as essential for solving big problems in engineering. So we're going to take this opportunity as a midpoint check-in after our profiles to check the chat and see if there are any questions. I know that there was a question early on about when these faculty profiles were conducted, and most of these were conducted in the summer when we felt that faculty would have more time to sit and chat with us. So we do recognize that there have been advances in AI, but we hope that what these faculty shared is still somewhat true. Are there any other questions that you all see, Amber or Courtney?
There was one. Oh, go ahead, Amber.
No, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say there are a couple in the chat from Brian that I saw that we haven't gotten to yet. Sorry, they keep jumping around as people type more. So how do our presenters see ways that AI will influence faculty requests for document deliveries related to their research and faculty and student requests for assistance with licensed database search strategies bypassing librarians? I personally have not seen a lot of that yet, but I didn't know if you two had anything to add on that.
No, but I think that using the phrase bypassing the library is something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially for STEM researchers. I don't think there is even a lot of thought about how journal subscriptions are from the institution and from the library. They're just on their computers accessing resources, and they don't think much about the infrastructure behind it.
I agree with you, Tessa. I was going to say, I think there's already a disconnect with our faculty and our students and accessing library resources that they access online, but they don't realize that they're actually utilizing resources that we have paid for, that we manage, that we subscribe to, that we provide access to, that we teach with, right? So I can see how there's an even further disconnect when you plug it, especially for a student going to something like ChatGPT, and then you ask a question and it gives you an answer, but there's literally no context for where that information came from, or any citations for further research or investigating, or even just double checking that that information is accurate. So I think AI does definitely dirty that a little bit, muddy the waters, I guess is the phrase that I'm thinking of. But I think there already is a disconnect without AI even being involved in terms of the resources that the library provides and our role in managing and providing access to those resources.
There was another question about library or faculty creating resources to help students evaluate AI, and Amber mentioned we'll be talking about this more in our presentation, but we can talk about it later in our Q&A at the end too as well. And we had another question, the pros and cons of each faculty member having their own AI policy. Does anyone want to speak to that briefly?
I would just jump in to say with that question, I think the biggest issue that I'm seeing right now is not that one faculty member has this policy and one has this policy. It's that a lot of faculty members have no policy. So students are going in and they're completely unaware of if they can use AI, in what ways they can use it, because some faculty, and I think I'll mention this a little bit later on, but are kind of burying their heads in the sand and choosing not to address it. So I think if students had clear guidance, even if that guidance was different in each of their classes, it would be more helpful to them than what they're a lot of times currently experiencing, which is that there's no guidance and no addressing of AI at all in many of their courses.
Yeah, I think as Amber's profile showed, there's the early adopters like the engineering professor and the comp professor that do intentionally incorporate it into their coursework. A lot of their colleagues are not addressing it at all, which is interesting. There was one more question about concerns around AI tools summarizing articles that would violate subscription licensing. I don't have the expertise in that, so I don't have an answer, but Courtney or Amber, do you have thoughts on that?
I would leave that to our copyright librarian.
For sure. Well, maybe we can come back to that at the end if we think of thoughts later. So I think we've been able to address most of the questions in the chat, and there will be time. So Jane, thanks for kind of looking through the chat and hopefully catching something if we missed something. But we do have more to talk about. We're going to move on to talking about some challenges and opportunities, and then we'll be sharing some specific educational interventions that we have come up with. So I'll turn it back over to Amber to start about challenges in composition.
Yeah, so among instructors and faculty teaching first-year writing courses in particular, the biggest challenge, unsurprisingly, seemed to be around actually getting students to take ownership of their learning and to not cheat themselves out of learning to write, which is such a valuable skill that students need in college. Everyone I spoke with talked about how they know some students are using AI for their writing. In fact, most students they think are using it in some ways for their writing. And while some had greater concerns than others about cheating, the overall feeling seemed to be that AI is providing an even easier means for students who don't want to take college seriously to get out of their learning. So again, these are generally first-year students in these courses. So there's just concern among the faculty here that AI is setting these new students up for failure if they get used to using it and decide to rely on it throughout all of their coursework all throughout college. So instructors and faculty in my discipline seem to be navigating how to get students to want to learn versus just getting through the class by whatever means necessary. The other big challenge that I want to talk about is that students are using AI, obviously, and they're really excited to learn more about AI. But many of their faculty and many of the writing faculty I talk to are still hesitant or even completely resistant to teaching about AI or to integrating it into their courses. So while Michelle was utilizing AI extensively in the classroom, Joan's experience of not being quite ready to jump on board, not being an early adopter, is much more the norm with the instructors I spoke with, as well as with just other faculty that I interact with regularly in my job who I didn't talk to specifically for this project. Hesitant faculty like Joan might be busy, or they just feel like AI is a passing fad, someone else can figure it out before I jump in. So that's one type of faculty I encounter, these hesitant faculty. And then I think the other type is resistant faculty. And resistant faculty are kind of choosing to bury their heads in the sand and say, I'm just going to pretend AI doesn't exist. I'm not going to address it, or I'm just going to tell my students, hey, don't use it, even though that's not really a realistic expectation for students.
All right, so the first challenge here, as I've mentioned for art, as content creators, many artists are naturally skeptical of AI and may want nothing to do with it. They have legitimate concerns about the ethics and the reuse of their own work. However, students also have many misconceptions about AI that prevent them from developing a rich understanding of its intricacies. AI literacy is not currently integrated into the studio art curriculum. So finding the time to incorporate instruction around AI into the classroom is a challenge for many faculty. It takes a professor like Georgia the painter who is knowledgeable about the challenges and opportunities in the field as an artist, utilizing AI to encourage students to learn more about it. So in other words, it's kind of up to the faculty member to find the time and put in the effort to discuss AI with their students. And then the second challenge here is that although we do have a very robust graphic design program at U of L, it is actually our top major in the visual arts. Digital media skills are not part of the core art curriculum. So a lot of our design students pick those up, but students outside of the design disciplines don't necessarily get that as a foundation. Georgia the painter expressed frustration that students don't know basics like how to resize images, and they find themselves spending a lot of time teaching foundational digital skills, which can make it challenging to incorporate something a little bit more complicated like AI into the classroom. At the art library, we troubleshoot a lot of technical issues and field questions from students about many technology topics. So perhaps those of you who work in smaller libraries know we tend to kind of be our own internal IT department. So we see students struggle with using Adobe Creative Cloud programs, printing assignments, and even this semester, we've had some students struggle with just basic email usage, which we think comes from a reliance on using mobile devices instead of desktop computers, which is what they're typically doing when they're here in the art library. So without that foundation of just digital media skills, it can be challenging to kind of scaffold that to then incorporate some of the complexities of AI.
Cool. And while similarly, STEM professors I talked to were aware of AI, in some ways their dismissal of it also leads them to not talk about it with their students in their classes. They don't see it as important to discuss in a class that's already full of content. They just don't have time to cover it when they're trying to teach various aspects of science. However, the consequence of that is that students are often left with no guidance since, as we've mentioned before, our university has left it up to instructors' discretion about whether AI can be used in their classes or not. So clearly students are considering AI, but they're wary to disclose their use of it and may try to hide it from their instructors. I also talked a lot with STEM students and faculty about using AI for finding and writing about scientific literature. So, although I do sometimes talk about free tools, I'll give a shout out to my favorite Research Rabbit that does a great job of creating citation network graphs that I think can really help students understand the literature and identify gaps. I'm weary to recommend other tools like Elicit that are increasingly commercialized and require a subscription to be able to access its full features. We've seen some tools as free betas go from .orgs to .coms, and I really think that this is putting the onus of paying for research tools on researchers as opposed to the prevailing model since then that have been institutional access through libraries. So this is quite the change and can really highlight some inequities in funding for different labs, different individuals. They're kind of, if they're not thinking about the library and they think they have to subscribe to these tools, that can get quite expensive. I would be interested to hear more from students about whether they are actually subscribing to these tools or not, and whether they think it's valuable. But I do have some deep skepticism over, their data sources, whether they're comprehensive. There's a lot of questions left about these tools. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Amber to talk about opportunities.
Yeah, so as I talked about in her profile, Michelle, the writing instructor, was full of opportunities, right? She outlined a myriad of ways in which AI is strengthening her students' writing skills. So I think in the writing classroom in particular, there are definitely tons of opportunities for integrating AI. We talked about integrating it as a brainstorming tool for students, as a revision tool for their writing, and as a tool for teaching them how to read and interact with scholarly articles, which some of them may be doing for the first time. So overall, AI seems to be a pretty natural fit for the composition classroom because there are all of these opportunities to teach students ways that AI can support their learning and support them in becoming a better writer without just writing their paper, and actually teaching students that AI can't write a great paper. So showing them its strengths and its weaknesses. Along those lines, there's also an opportunity for writing instructors to use AI as a tool in their instruction in the ways that I just mentioned, as well as using it for planning their instruction. Of course, this applies to more than just writing instructors, but AI can help come up with ways to gamify a lesson, or can create a lesson from a set of learning objectives, or can help brainstorm engaging activities for students. While Joan was worried about the time involved in getting up to speed with AI, I do think that once she gets past that, she might see that AI is not only a powerful tool to help her students learn, but also a really helpful and time-saving tool for her as a teacher.
All right, so as a studio faculty member put it to me, AI is here, it's not going anywhere, so we may as well embrace it and prepare our students as best as possible. In this conversation, AI was compared to Photoshop. So when Photoshop was introduced, it led to questions about the authenticity of an image and questions about what makes a real work of art. Many artists were worried about the long-term impact that editing tools like Photoshop would have on the field. However, Photoshop is now a standard tool, so all U of L students have access to it through the Adobe Creative Cloud suite, and all art students receive expert level instruction on how to use it. AI may be the next step in the evolution of technological developments, so there's an opportunity to embrace that technology in the art classroom. And then as a librarian, I'm excited about the opportunities for incorporating AI literacy into the information literacy classroom. Since students are already actively using generative AI tools to find information for their research papers, it can be an effective starting point for discussing the creation and dissemination of information. I think it does a disservice to ignore students' actual information seeking behaviors when teaching a research session. However, my time with students in the classroom is very limited, and it's usually focused on resources specific to the art library. Therefore, I'm invested in collaborating with my colleagues like Amber and Tessa from research assistance and instruction to discuss discipline agnostic trends in AI and how the U of L libraries can support AI literacy together.
And one opportunity that STEM faculty were interested in but haven't yet explored on my campus is using AI for advanced data analysis and experimentation. I mostly talked to either primarily teaching faculty or tenure faculty that were kind of phasing out their research, but a lot of promise, there is a lot of promise in using AI for STEM research. A few quick examples would be creating algorithms for genomic data sets, or using AI for environmental monitoring, or in chemistry for materials synthesis experimentation. Another huge opportunity for STEM researchers is the ability for generative AI to quickly disseminate research findings. The pace of scientific publishing has already increased rapidly in the past decade, and with AI, we've seen this even more so. Although some of this comes with questions about ethical use and authorship, some people have made some great points that using AI for translation in particular is very beneficial for promoting global research, since traditionally non-English publications have been largely ignored by the Western world. Many scientific journals have outlined AI policies, but it would be great to see some standardized way of disclosing this information, as some have noted this could look similar to disclosures of conflicts of interest. So in the next couple of minutes that we have, we want to leave plenty of time for questions, but we also want to give you all some practical takeaways. We're each going to talk about a short educational intervention about AI literacy. So Amber?
Yeah, so I'll just share quickly about one of the ways that we've approached teaching about generative AI and helping students develop AI literacy skills at our university is with the creation of a micro course called Generative AI for College Students. This micro course was developed by Tessa and myself in partnership with our University Writing Center and Digital Media Suite over this past summer as an instructional tool to help faculty integrate short lessons about AI into their class content. So each of these 6 lessons, which you can see up on the screen, only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. It's really nice because the micro course is what we call discipline agnostic. So lessons can really be integrated into any course, regardless of discipline. And each lesson is standalone. So faculty don't need to assign all 6 lessons. They can just assign one that makes the most sense for their course and for what they're teaching. The micro course provides faculty with a really simple way to start having conversations conversations with their students about the ethical use of AI in college without feeling like they themselves have to become experts on everything first. So we've had several faculty who have worked through the microcourse themselves, and they tell us it was really valuable to their own learning. And we're also starting to see some faculty who are now starting to assign the content to their students and integrating it into their courses. It's only been live since, the end of August, so it's very new, but we're excited to see how faculty will continue to use it with their students in the coming semesters.
Sorry.
All right. So when brainstorming a classroom activity, I was inspired by my prior work on using Wikipedia to teach information literacy skills. I've published a lot on Wikipedia as a tool in information literacy. And so whereas for many years I taught students how to use Wikipedia more effectively as a starting point for further research, I now see generative AI tools like ChatGPT replacing Wikipedia as the first place that students start. I want students to understand how the research process works and what they should do next after they consult an AI tool. So one way that I plan on doing that is with this visual analysis paralysis activity. The visual analysis is a key assignment for undergraduate art students that basically analyzes an artwork's formal elements and its historical context and meaning. And ChatGPT and other generative AI tools can create a visual analysis for you. You can just put in a title of a work of art and an artist, or even upload an image of a work of art, especially if it's something, again, in that like art historical canon, and then it will produce one. And so students can be provided an assigned work of art, use ChatGPT to do a visual analysis, and then work in the classroom to critique it, asking questions like, where does this information come from? Since it doesn't show any citations or indicate where the information comes from, it would be interesting to see what students think about that when analyzing the analysis. Do students agree or disagree with the findings? This is all about critical thinking. So instead of just copying and pasting something that's produced by ChatGPT, they really should be determining, what they really think about the work of art, because there isn't a right answer when doing a visual analysis. So what's missing, no image or citations. What could students do next? If using a ChatGPT as the starting point, they can mine the analysis for keywords, use those to find reliable sources from the art library. And so students could present sort of their findings from evaluating the visual analysis from ChatGPT, and then we could have some discussion around the effectiveness of using generative AI tools for these types of assignments and how to go further in the research process.
And I'll just wrap up quickly with one of the ideas that I had. This could be for a STEM course, but also any STEM course. I have to admit, I haven't been able to actually test out this activity yet. So if you would like to, please feel free. As Courtney mentioned, we often have limited time with students, so we don't always have these opportunities, but perhaps you could do this as a separate workshop, or if you have a credit-bearing course, this could fit very well in. But basically, is the price right? You would give groups of students envelopes with paper money, think Monopoly money, of an annual allowance. It could be as little as $100, it could be as much as 1,000, and have each group investigate a different AI search tool. If you're unfamiliar with AI search tools, there's a lot of LibGuides out there, so I'm not going to list them out here today. But really having students evaluate these tools both for their functionality and also their price points can really help students evaluate whether or not they would want to invest in these tools or not. You could kind of leave it open, or you could have a handout with some guiding questions. But then at the end, each group would present the tool, show a little bit about how it works, and provide a rationale for why they would or wouldn't invest in it if they can afford it even at all. So then I think this opens it up really to talk about information privilege and barriers to funding at various institutions and globally, and how these tools differ from traditional library databases, and also have an open discussion about implications for the future. So even if you don't have time for a full activity like this, I do think it's important to kind of contextualize AI search tools in this way with students as well. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our questions slide and have our emails up here so you can jot those down. We'd be happy to take more questions via email if you think of them later. But we'll just see if you have questions. We might return to the Padlet, but I'm just going to give us some space now to see if there are overall questions that we can address in the time that we have left. Jane, if you see any questions that we've missed, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there was a question. So what is your advice to us to improve the insights, knowledge of our faculty members on the positive aspects of Gen AI?
Mm-hmm. Someone else want to take that first?
I mean, honestly, I think that the way that I've seen faculty like most get on board with it is by hearing about other faculty who are doing cool things with it. Like we've had people reach out and be like, hey, do you know anyone who's using this for assignment design or who's designing assignments around AI? Our faculty development center has like an AI group that any faculty can go to. It's just like a discussion group that meets, every once in a while to talk about these things. Obviously, you're going to have faculty who are not going to be involved with any of this regardless. But I think that the more that they hear, not just from us as librarians, but from their colleagues that are like in the classroom with students every day, and they hear like, oh, hey, I'm using AI in this cool way, that's going to be the thing that changes their mind. So as many of those stories as you can have at your disposal of what other faculty are doing and how they're using it in ways that are really helping student learning, I think is going to be the thing that changes their mind more than anything else, more than anything we tell them.
I did think of something else to add. Yeah, so Eli the Engineer is based on a real collaborative group with engineers that librarians have worked on with this grant proposal. And so their idea is to create this faculty learning community, pulling in other people from STEM areas and even business, and having that small group of people really hone in on learning outcomes related to AI literacy and how that might fit in their course, as well as other ways to teach AI. So I think, yeah, kind of helping to make those connections with people who are using AI in the classroom can really help shift perspectives with other faculty. Do you have something to add, Courtney?
I think that I would say, Georgia, the painting professor, is really excited about some of the opportunities as far as digital media art with AI. And one of the things that I do as the director of the art library is I do all of our collection development. And so I think anytime that we can get new resources in terms of exhibition catalogs, et cetera, on artists who are doing cool things with AI, our faculty would want to hear about that and then have their students at least aware of some of those trends in the field. So even though that's not necessarily related to maybe even what they're doing in their classes with their students, they still want their students to have knowledge about what's going on in the field. And that's going to include these innovations using artificial intelligence technology. And we can provide those resources and share that with our faculty.
I just wanted to acknowledge some of the comments in the chat about how interesting it would be to hear from students about their perceptions of AI. I think we really intentionally wanted to speak with faculty first because that is the most influencing factor of how AI is discussed in the classroom. So we kind of approached it from the faculty and librarian side first. I think it would be really interesting to talk with students as well. I mentioned that our engineering librarian has worked on a separate project where she has interviewed engineering students about their perceptions of AI. I don't know all of her findings yet because I haven't quite heard from her about it yet, but I think, yeah, that's definitely something to consider. Any other questions?
I'm not sure. I don't think you answered this one, but someone had asked if you are planning to publish these findings.
I will just say we did not go through IRB, so I'm not sure that we will be able to publish our data. And part of the reason why we went with personas instead of a lot of direct quotes and identifying information of our participants. So this is it. We really wanted to focus on this presentation, but I think, our interests in AI as research interests will certainly grow, as many of you all will. And, again, this could inspire you to do a similar study on your campus. So you're welcome to steal from us.
There is a question in the chat. I'm genuinely very surprised that none of the people polled said anything about its energy consumption, contribution to the climate crisis. Did anyone say anything at all? From my conversations, no, but I will say that my questions were very much directed, and we shared the questions in the chat, at how are your students using this? How is it affecting your research? We did leave room where we said, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about AI? But we weren't it wasn't super general, the questions we were asking them. We were very focused focused on teaching, learning, and scholarship. So that may be why no one brought that up to me. And Tessa and Courtney may have had a different experience where someone did bring that up.
Yeah, I'll just add that we did talk about this over the summer, and I'm not saying that nobody had no idea about it then, but I do think we're hearing about the criticisms a lot more. So I would be interested if that was more present in people's minds now versus when we originally talked to them.
I'll just add that this did come up in my conversation with some studio art faculty, and I think that artists they tend to be anti-capitalist, anti-consumerist, and a lot of artwork kind of calls out those things and disrupts and fights back against the system. And so the faculty member that I spoke with did acknowledge some of those concerns, but talked about how AI can actually help artists to call that out. But I don't have a direct, quote about specifically what they said, but some of those concerns about climate change and the impact as far as like consumerism of AI did come up.
I think we're about time. So again, please write down our emails. Feel free to email us. We'd be happy to continue this conversation. Jane, if you want to say something about the evaluation form, I see that you dropped that in the chat.
I'll take it from here. Yes, the evaluation form has been put in a couple of times. I'd like to thank our presenters, Amber, Courtney, and Tessa, for sharing their expertise. It was very valuable and to listen to. And I'd also like to thank our ACRL contact, Lois, for helping put this together and allow us to share this information to so many people. And remember that we'll send a link to the recording and other supplemental documents for this session when it's available, and that'll be available shortly. And as I said, a reminder to fill out the evaluation, which will be in that. But otherwise, thanks to everyone for attending today, and hope you have a great rest of the week. Thanks again, Amber, Courtney, and Tessa.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Brad.
happy to do it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for the opportunity.